Thank you so much, Angela, for being with us. Hello to everybody in Brazil at this moment. It's a privilege to be the connection between Angela Schanelec and Olhar de Cinema, a film festival that I truly love and a filmmaker that I truly admire. So thank you so much, Angela, for your time. I know that you are always busy working on your films and the next projects that you have. And to us that you have given us a couple of minutes to be talking about cinema, your cinema, it's more than a privilege. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
My first question is something which is so maybe silly to ask, but one thing is to think about a story that maybe we want to tell. Then there's a moment that you write, as anybody, a script, but the process from the paper or our imaginations toward the material in itself, which is the shot, it's a different moment. It's absolutely different from paper to the camera and the material taken by the camera. So I would like to know is how do you start thinking that process of translating what is in the paper, the story, and so on, and the main decisions towards the aspect that you will be working, the type of scale of the shot, and so on. So first of all, to start that, for instance, if we think about the opening sequences in I Was at Home But, how do you get from that moment that you thought there was an animal, there should be a donkey, and then how do you, the way you thought and then the way it's being shot? Do you understand my...
Yes, I understand your question. I would say that it's true that there is a step from the paper to the image, which is seen then on film, but the same importance is the step before, what is written on the paper, which will be then the base of what we will shoot. And this step from having a thought and deciding how this thought will appear on paper is, for me, definitely, I would say, even more important, because if there is if what is written on the paper is not really, in a very general way, the right thing, then there will appear many difficulties which then maybe cost money, cost time, and maybe make impossible to make it as good as it can be. So the decisive thing for me is what is on the paper. And when this is decided, then it's much more easy to describe the process.
And Angela, because there are many different ways to write down what a filmmaker must be doing. I know some filmmakers, they write in certain ways which are like a kind of a sketch, but they are not specific and analytically written what they are about to do. Some others, they do, but they betray. I am having the intuition that when you write, you have thought a lot about what is about to be. So at that moment of the writing, you also think in terms of what kind of shot are you about to use? Like an open shot is it could be also what kind of a scale of shots you are going to use, and the length of the shot, or that is something that it's absolutely decided or the developed is on the moment of the shooting. I know if you don't, if you understand.
No. It's very important for me to decide it during the writing process. I wanna insert that it's important for me not to be misunderstood in terms of that the DOP, that I do the work of the DOP. This is not at all the case, because there is still, even if it's for me decisive to imagine the shot in terms of length, in terms of distance, in terms of movement, as exactly as possible, still there is, if I'm able to write it down in that sense, a lot of work then in the process during the shooting, because we are working. I mean, to do a film means to work with humans, and they breath, and they are beings, and yes, from during the shooting there's so much to involve then, that in my eyes it's just important to have that base, which is, as I described, decided in the most precise way as possible.
I see. So it would be like to prepare everything as possible, but at the same time to be open from what it cannot be predictable.
Yes, I mean, sure. Sure. There's a lot of things which are not predictable, because yes, you don't. I mean, during the writing process, normally I don't know the space, for example, and then after the scenes are written, we are going to find the spaces, and then knowing about them again changes what was in my mind, maybe not, but maybe. But I wanna, if you allow, I would like to go back to one point you already mentioned, because you said in the very beginning, how did you maybe we continue, and I come back. Okay. I come back to it. No, I remember now. You said, you talked about the connection between the story, having the story in mind, and then starting to write. And there is something I want to remark. I want to say, yes, about that it can happen that if you have the story in mind, and even if it's not the story, even if it's just the development of the scene, that the fact that you know how the scene develops makes you unable to write the scene, because then you just look what shots will fulfill the scene. But this is not what it is about, writing shots. Writing shots is something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe not so simple. I don't know whether I can make myself clear.
Maybe we could make yourself clear if we think about any particular scene in one of your films, which for me would be very interesting, because I can imagine some kind of scenes which can be in certain ways thought in advance, but some other scenes in your film seems to be a kind of discovery or a kind of event in itself. Like, how could it be that something like that? It could be in front of my eyes. So maybe we can pick some particular scenes.
Give me an example.
Well, I give you an example. For instance, there is a moment sorry for my German, is a truly disaster, but so there is a moment which is outstanding where the main character, the young character, is with a woman who used to live near him, and they are talking, and in certain ways the whole scene takes their own rhythm, and somehow she goes towards him and she has him. You must remember that.
You mean between the two young?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the whole scene there, for me, it has such a perfection in the sense of the rhythm. The moment that she decides to go towards his body. So when I see this scene particularly, I wonder myself how she did it, because there is the whole context, the movement of the body, the time, the length of the moment that you are seeing her, that she might be not doing anything, and somehow she goes towards him and hugs him. So that kind of moment, I could use some other spots in your film.
We talk about the scene in the room.
Yes.
Talk about the scene in the room.
Exactly.
Yes, but okay, but this is an example which is quite simple.
Uh-huh.
Because in this scene nothing happens. It's just the dialogue which happens. So this is quite simple, because then, I mean, for this scene it was good and helpful that we rehearsed it. This is one of the very last scenes. We rehearsed, and we wanted to rehearse it in the space where we will shoot it, to know and where we will put the camera.
Uh-huh.
And so we could do that. We could be in that room, and so we had the chance to decide where is what, like where's the table, where's the bed, what is the distance between the spots where they will be, what movement is possible or necessary to approach between the two of them, where is the window, we could plan everything, and the only thing was to find the way to shoot it, but the dialogue already exists, and it's interesting what no, because now I find out that what I was talking before is about scenes where something shall happen in order of an action, and the action is not that. In that case, I don't mean with action that she hugs him. I mean with action, for example, in the traumhafte Weg, in the dream path, what has happened in the beginning scene of this big that he gets a call, he goes, he takes the phone, he breaks down, she sees it. This kind of action.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I was talking about. But for example, in this scene you make, we just I let them play, and then we found the first image, And then we stayed with this image till the moment we had the feeling, or I had the feeling, that now it should change.
Mm-hmm.
I think the decisive thing is that you don't look forward, that you that you as a viewer, as someone who is in cinema, just follow what you see, but you don't think this shot shall lead to this one. So how can I do this shot that it leads to another one, which is clearly more normal. I mean, when you have a scene where it's action, because then you know what should happen.
Yes, I
so
understand.
in that case, but the interesting thing is, although if you have a scene where you want that something happens, you should proceed in the same way. And this is sometimes can be it can happen then that you are faster, that it makes sense.
I see.
In your head during the writing process, because you know, yes, I want to go there, so how can I do it that this next step is possible? But this never makes sense. Not in my eyes, not in a scene where is action happening, as not in a scene where you just have 10 pages dialogue.
I see. Very interesting. And yes, you absolutely. And that was it's very funny. It's a kind of meta reading. When I was thinking about this meeting, I was thinking about what you are saying right now, because I have that kind of idea that maybe we could explore so deeply, and it start happening, and I really, really like it. Let me add another process of the moment, because one thing is the moment of the paper, thinking about the film, the paper process, then the shooting moment, but then you have the editing moment, which again can change completely the whole process. I assume that you are extremely near the process of editing. It's not that you leave it and then, no, you are part of the whole structure of the film. So again, how is this, because that is the last movement of the creation of the scene, of the shot. So how do you perceive that, and what is the intelligence behind it? What are you looking for at the moment of the editing moment?
The editing is, you can more or less say that I have the editing in mind when I write.
Yes, I can imagine.
So the editing
not doing anything.
is
It's almost not doing anything. It's just putting together.
I think it's finding the rhythm. How long are the shots then? And I do very less changes through the editing process. Editing is one of the most beautiful parts of the whole process, and I edited the first films I did by myself, and then with The Dream Path I started again to edit by myself. Home, very simple. And the point is then to find the rhythm, which means how long are the shots, and to find out whether you maybe still, although already through the writing process I try to write only down what I will need in the editing, and I'm quite far in this process, quite able right now. Meanwhile, but still, then to find out whether there is maybe a scene you can avoid, you don't need. But this is it, more or less.
And let's go. So now we have seen the whole process, but let's go again into the scenes. There was a kind of, I wouldn't say that a shift, but I would say there is a kind of radicalization. I don't know if you agree with me, especially after Orly and Bridges of Sarajevo, when you did the Dream Path, and now also I Was at Home That. I think there was a kind of it's the same kind of cinema. Is you, of course. The topics are more or less the ones that you have been going through, survey and explore during your films. But do you think there was a kind of radicalization towards the mise en scène? Do you feel that, or is it my impression?
I would not. I mean, there's a difference. And the difference appeared because of what I was talking before in the Dream Path. I wrote for the first time a script where I needed to direct action much more than in the films before. I mean, there are things happening in the Dream Path. The example I just said, and so on. It continues. How does it happen when they kidnap the woman, the mother, from the hospital to the place where they then finally kill her? How does he give the money to the dealer? How? There's so much action, and finding out how I want to shoot that was a process then which changes, or which gives you which makes it obvious that kind of something different started with the Dream Path.
I had a feeling in the last two films that there is much more, I would say, density and concentration towards each fragment of the film on one hand, and then there is also a kind of proliferation of shots on hands and feet. There is a kind of you, although in the other films you have done, there are also moments that you put attention on the whole body language. But here there's more specific shots on that. I was wondering, it would be easy for me to say the word Bresson, but beyond that, what is behind that? Because it seems to be that you are more interested in the condensation of a small detail beyond the action. I don't know if I make myself...
No, yes, but this has to do with the action. Because if you ask yourself how you want to film that someone is doing something, then why you want to do that? Why shall we do something? Why shall that happen in front of the camera? And when I find out that I want to show this action very pure, then I need to avoid the face. Because the face always adds something. And I started then to be more interested in showing just the pure action. I mean, with a very simple example, you want to show that someone is going along the street, and if you show the whole physics, the whole figure, then you show a lot. You show how he moves, what he wears, how the street looks, how is the weather, all these things. But it can happen that you just want to tell that he goes. And this is the action I'm talking about, that he goes from A to B.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it's better only to show the shoes. It's as simple. And so this continues. I could do it with for example, when he falls when he receives the telephone call, and then we see just his body, and we see the hands of the other person, of the policeman carrying him. If I would see the whole figure, I would see his face. I would see the face of the other person. It would be a completely other scene. But finding out that I only want to tell that someone is there, and makes him not to fall on the floor, on the ground. I just need that, and it makes sense. It's as simple. And then, when I understood that, and when I did that, and then I thought, okay, I'm not the first person who's doing that. So, but you understand that Absolutely. I did not have any problem with it because I just went through that process, and then in a way I was also happy.
That's for sure. There is something again which is quite radical in certain ways in the last two films, which is about how do you use the ellipsis. Somehow in the dream path we move towards another moment, another characters, it's another situation. And there is no a specific reach. You have to assume as a viewer that something has happened in terms of time, something has happened in terms of the characters. Then we recover those characters, but there's something completely changed. And then again, in the I Was at Home But, there are certain moments that many viewers could be absolutely lost because they don't know exactly when the father of the family or the husband has died. It's clear from the beginning for me, but it's not so clear. Maybe there is no one stressful information on that. The information is there, but it's not delivered in front of your eyes. So how do you understand the ellipsis? What to be said or not to be said? Because it's very completely personal for me what you have done in the last two films towards that particular device, a particular way of telling something.
I think this question or answer, or thinking about this subject has to do with the idea of what understanding, what role plays understanding. Because understanding a story is something which your head does. And I think my films are not so much done for the head. This has to do with, I don't do a film to make someone understand something. I have no idea why I should do that. This is completely, I'm not a teacher. I'm not a politician. I'm not a social worker. I have no idea. This is not my plan. This is not my goal. This is not my idea to make someone understand something.
No, I understand what you said very well. And I remember myself discussing with some film critics that were attacking you in Berlinale in 2019 and trying to explain them that they don't have to understand. There's another layer in your films, and which for me is the most important and the most substantial in each film that you have done. And let me put it words on that. I think one of the most outstanding feature of your films is how could we understand the world of feelings, but in a very specific way in certain times, but also going through something very difficult to explore feelings, because feelings usually are extremely coded and extremely establish how to understand feelings, but feelings are very difficult to go through. And for me, your films are about that.
About
So,
feelings.
yes, but it's
Yes.
not about one character feeling. The feeling itself is a feeling. That's my way to understand, because it says to me, and maybe you can correct me, like each character adds something else, but the feeling itself is like kind of entity with feelings. I don't know if how do you see that?
It's I don't know how I can answer, because this, I mean for sure it's clear on one hand, or it's clear if we don't talk about understanding something, then what is then, so what can it be then about? So it's about feeling. Sure, this is this is true. But what is your question?
No, my question is the following. On one hand, Hollywood films, for instance, not only Hollywood, even independent film cinema, they usually, there is certain ways to portray certain feelings. There is a kind of code of that, which for me...
Someone said, and then he expresses sadness.
Exactly. But it's not the way that you work. For instance, the last film you have done, on one hand, I would say it's a film about the feeling of absence, because someone has died, and the whole family is trying to understand what to do with someone who is not anymore with us. And each one of them, they are adapting towards that absence. And then all the other characters, which are not part of the family, in certain ways resemble in the same kind of feeling. And the whole film goes around that process of absence, which is very difficult to shoot, it's very difficult to approach, because by definition, absence is what is not. But at the same time, it's a feeling that you could feel so deeply what it means to lose someone. So that's what I mean.
Yes, but yes, I see what you mean. But I think if we try to imagine the first, and it's not the first scene, the beginning was the boy. He's coming back, and then he's at this school director place, and then his mother's coming, and so my wish, or what I just wanted to see that. I imagine I would be privileged to see a woman on a schoolyard, on an empty schoolyard, during school time, running across this yard. And then I personally, and I'm just a very normal person, I'm the viewer. There's no difference between me and any viewer. But if I would look from a window on the schoolyard and I would see a woman running alone across the schoolyard, I would like to look at her. I would not think, I have no idea why she's running, so why I'm not interested. It's the opposite. It's clearly the opposite. So is it with more or less each scene and each shot. My wish is, or I try to do the shot that it's interesting by itself, without knowing, without understanding, without being part of a story which leads the story from A to B. And so is it with everything. Why should anyone not wish to know why this woman is running in terms of creating an interest? Just an interest. And then it's not that I tell nothing. Then I understand that she's obviously the mother of this boy, and that she obviously missed him. Strongly, is this the word? So this is so much as a story. Why do I have to know more to create my interest? And that's how everything works for me. I'm just someone who is looking at things, and then I see no reason why I should explain more if I'm already interested. And this is how I do it. And this is also already through the writing process important to find out what is enough. It's very annoying, boring, and not necessary at all to tell more than it is necessary to tell.
And that's my question. How do you perceive what is necessary? I know that it's almost impossible to answer that. But
I mean, necessary is exactly, maybe it helps to understand that to find out what is necessary depends not only on the action, it depends on everything which makes the shot, which means how does the figure look? What does she wear? How is the light? How distant are we? What do we hear? And so on and so on. And the point is that it's interesting to take everything from what the image and the sound, the film, of this moment we see in a shot is made of, and then to find out what is necessary and what not. You understand what I mean?
Absolutely. For me, it is. The other day, I usually don't put myself in situations of labs and discussion and all these ridiculous things that nowadays cinema has been undergoing. But someone asked me to participate in a film festival lab, and I say, okay, it's just for you. And we were discussing with the filmmakers about films which are not yet done. They are still the first cut or something like that. And I was telling them something near to you, like about the necessity. For me, it's very difficult to recognize, but if you start thinking of beyond the action, about the light, the movement, the body language, the relationship between the light and the objects and the space, and you see that if that is not there, the shot in itself would die. Well, that is because it's necessary. Otherwise, it's not necessary. And it's very difficult sometimes to realize. I would like to to put our heads together, if you like, in a moment which for me it's marvelous, absolutely marvelous, which is the scene in I was at home that, which is one of the most not only moving moment in the film, but also it's one of the most self-conscious moment in the film, which is the moment where the main actress and met a man who is played by another filmmaker who is Comgen. I don't know how to. Yeah, I know him very well. If we see each other, we hug each other, but I don't know how to pronounce his name. And the character is with the bike, and there is a long conversation. It's only one shot. It takes quite a lot, like 5, 6, 7 minutes, if my mind doesn't remember properly. And there is a lot of stuff over there. Can we go a little bit on that?
But you mean there is a lot of stuff? You mean, what do you mean with that? There's a lot of stuff. You mean what they talk about, or you mean what we see in the scene? Or?
Everything, everything. The way the whole sequence goes, what they said and what they don't say, the reactions, and how. Because for me, what is interesting about that particular scene in itself, it how we work the whole film together. What is behind and what is coming up. Not because there is a kind of key interpretation for the whole film, but something is going on there, because the film think itself at that moment. That's how I see that particular scene. First of all, I like to know how do you got to that moment. It was something that you knew from the very beginning. It was something that you write and then you realized it was so important.
No, it was. This is one of the scenes, and I think in that film almost the only one. I changed in the editing process. I changed the position because this scene first was almost at the very end of the film, and so during the writing process, the script was done more or less. I felt that I'm at the end, or I'm almost. And I thought, oh, she could meet that person again. And I started to write. And then I wrote this dialogue. And then it was clear that I don't want to edit it, that there is no reason to interrupt that scene, that it should be one shot. And then it was very simple. I gave it to Maren to learn it because it was a lot of text, and then I asked Dane, and then I brought the two together, and it was not really a rehearsal as I described before. It was just I wanted to know how long does it take when they do it, for us to know how long the street has to be where we can continuously travel. And when we did that, then we were looking for the space, and there were very less possibilities. I mean, where we shot it was almost the only possibility, because it was necessary that we could have enough distance. It was necessary not to have too many people because we could not close the street. So there were so many Bedingungen, conditions. Conditions is not the right word, but you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
They were so that we did not have too much choices. So, and then we did it.
And about what the text it's being said, it's a little bit important, because in certain ways it's about the limit of representation, or what does it mean truth in cinema, which is something which is behind it. And can
Yes,
you tell how do you see that?
yes, but it was not that I wanted to come to the point where I finally can express what I think about cinema. It was just that I thought it would be, I mean, it was already clear what she's doing, that she's working in kind of an art school, and there is this other person, and I thought, shouldn't they meet again? And then I made them talking.
Okay.
And then this was written also very fast. I wrote it, and then I did not change. I changed almost nothing, and it was very. I enjoyed it a lot because at that point, because the script was already done, almost, and I felt quite free. And I thought, let's do a long conversation. Why should they meet and then quit immediately? So it would be nice if they talk.
There is something that I always enjoy very much in your films, and also this something that nowadays nobody knows exactly what to do when that kind of resources is being used. I mean music. Music in films nowadays usually they are just for counteract problems, not because there is an aesthetic conviction why music should be in a certain moment. And one of the things that I usually admire how you use music in moments that nobody expects sometimes. For instance, I like so much that sometimes your characters start dancing from nothingness. You don't know, but they are dancing. And of course, in the last film, the moment that is being played, the David Bowie song, and with the choreography, which is a shot which is beyond before she's sleeping under the grave, on the grave of his husband. So, can you tell me a little bit about the use of music in your films, because it's quite singular.
It's not so singular. I mean, it's clear in my first films I did not use music.
I know.
I use it only when it comes from the scene, because someone puts music. So there are many people do, and for me the reason was just because music. It's clear influences completely the whole thing, and I wanted to make a film and not. I cannot do music. But because I had the wish for music, sometimes I had the wish to see them dancing or to listen to music. In medium length film I did, there is a long scene there where just listening to music. They are sitting and listening to music, and in my eyes, that was a possibility to give the music really the weight that it has. Mm-hmm. So they don't move anymore. They just listen like the audience is listening, because now we have music. And then I stepped a bit forward. I let them dance. And then film by film, I felt a bit more. I did not make any rules for myself. I thought, yes, in Nachmittag we had then the first time with these very, very short phrases of Bach, which repeats, but it's also was important for me that, it was such a thing that I do this, that it was already quite something and exhausting, so I thought I have to repeat. I want to repeat it, not I have to. I want to repeat it. It's enough. It's only this few tones, and then it stops, and then it comes again. Mm-hmm. And it's very reduced. It's really very reduced. And I saw, And then, so film by film, it changed a bit, and the reason for all this is that my interest in music is really very, very strong.
Mm-hmm.
It's the other way around. It's not that I'm not interested in music. That's why it's that it has really weight, and I yes. And in I was at home, but in the scene at the graveyard, the starting point was that it was clear for me that in that graveyard scene we would have the dancing scene, and from the very beginning I thought I don't wanna hear what they hear when they dance. It should be kind of, it should not be one-to-one. It should be a different layer or a different level. For sure, the music fits in a way, the rhythm it has to, otherwise it's painful. But it's, I think you feel that it's not the music they hear, they put in the room in the hospital when they dance. So I shot that scene with the song. They made the choreography, and then during the shooting, during the editing, I changed the music, and I was looking for another music. And when I found that Bowie song, I just tried to find out where can it start, and I was surprised by myself that it starts so early, and then it ends so that it goes through other shots, like in the museum. Then I didn't plan that, and it had also to do with the song, that there is this strange intro, which is only a few moments, and it sounds like you go in the bar before the song starts itself. And I found that it's nice, she goes in a graveyard, but it sounds that she's going in a bar. And then, as always, as from the very beginning, when I started to use music, I had the wish to interrupt hard, or to have the whole song. And then I thought, okay, but this is nice. So
that is it. And how do you? Because for me, any substantial filmmaker or director, the opening sequence in a film, it's decisive. It's not just, okay, let's start the film. However, no. The first shot in a film, it's a kind of almost a statement in certain ways. And how do you get to the whole idea to opening I was at home but with the whole sequence of the animals, and why the animals, which is so mysterious in the whole sequence?
This scene I wrote not in the beginning. I started writing the script with the coming back of the boy, but the first scenes or shots I wrote were not what we see now. There was one first shot where he appears on a crossing, between cars in the morning light and other people before he enters the school. And this was the beginning for me. And then when the first or second version of the script already was written, I thought, wouldn't it be nice if it's so clear for me that I don't want to tell where he was? this means it starts with a gap. Because if I see him in that way, like dirty in the morning, obviously different to all the others, it starts with a gap in terms of a question. The question is kind of a gap. And then I thought, why not to fill the gap with something connected to a state of dirt, which is connected to nature, and so I thought, okay, what in the nature we have the animals, and then I wrote the scenes,
which is outstanding.
It was beautiful to shoot it.
I can imagine.
Yes.
And I still remember in Berlinale to be at the very morning, early in the morning, watching this with all the audience and saying, wow, a film which starts like this, what's coming next? Because that's the feeling you have when you see something like that. Maybe I don't want to abuse about the time. We had been talking for almost 1 hour already. But I know that you're a teacher. You have I know one of your pupils or students, and one of them now they're filmmakers, like Elena Whitman and some others. I was wondering, when you are teaching, what exactly is the main knowledge that you transmit to them? And let's imagine that there are some people who are watching us who are filmmakers, which I guess probably they will be. So if you have to say something to them, what are you saying to your students? Because I know, as much as I understand, and knowing so well Elena Whitman, the impact that you have as a teacher is it's significant. So what would it be that?
It's stupid to have an answer on that question because there's one point, and this is that it's good if they take themselves serious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this. So I don't talk about me. So I think it's hard to say I don't talk about me because it's me who is talking, and I talk with my experience. But I definitely try to find out what is in their what is in their mind, what do they wish, and then I think it's good when they take themselves serious. And this sounds maybe simple, but it's not so simple.
Mm-hmm.
It happens very easily that you. It happens very easily or easily.
Yeah.
That you. You say, okay, it's clear. I want to tell that, but. Is it interesting? Does anyone understand it? Does anyone want to see it? But these questions do not help anything. So, yes, and it goes in both directions that it's not so simple to understand what it means to take yourself serious.
Mm-hmm. And how was the moment that you realized that you wanted to be a filmmaker? There was some particular films, or there was something that how do you perceive yourself that, well, this is the path that I will about to walk? Do you remember how was the connection?
Oh, I mean, it started with writing. That when I was working at theater, I was already writing, and because it was a strange idea, I thought about writing a script because I saw films, but I think I don't know, it had to do with my situation long ago, with my situation as an actress, with my experience as an actress, with my life, with my situation in my life. This is, I think, I don't know. There was no special moment.
Do you used to watch a lot of films? You were a cinephile, or it was something which...
I cannot say that I was cinephile because I started to watch films very late. I was already in my mid-20s when I started to see really films. And then it developed quite fast that I prefer to go to cinema than to theater, and it was a strange idea to work at a place where I don't want to be in the audience. And then, I mean, I said this often that this was when I saw L'Argent de Bresson and also other films of Godard, Antonioni, but there are two films, Sauf qui peut la vie and L'Argent, and I was really, maybe it was, I'm quite sure that it was the fact that I started to see films so late, that it was not normal for me at all, but then it was connected with the fact that I was already working in that space. I mean, acting and moving in front of someone to tell something with your body and so on. You understand what I mean? So, and I think that this came together, what I was doing at that moment and what I was seeing in cinema was really very exciting for me. And yes.
Okay, you have been so kind, and I know that there were certain moments which helps me, and I guess it has helped the viewers that they will be watching this to have a kind of different way to relate to films, which at the end of the day is what at least myself was looking for in this conversation. You have been so nice. Thank you so much for your time. And
you're very welcome. May I tell a word of what I said about taking yourself serious, because I don't want to be misunderstood. This taking yourself serious means also to look at yourself with distance.
Mm.
It doesn't only mean understand what you wish and then follow that idea. This is not. Is it not? This is not what I wanted to say. Maybe this is not what I wanted to say.
No, but if we were in a Lacanian psychoanalysis moment, the psychoanalyst would say, "Okay, we'll see each other next week." Thank you so much, and thank
Have
you
a
for
nice
the whole
rest of the day.
Okay.
And see you soon. Bye. Bye.
Bye.